The jungle breathed around her like a living thing, and Staff Sergeant Yolanda Mbu pressed her cheek against the stock of her rifle, watching the second target through her scope. He was good, patient, but he had made one mistake 3 minutes ago when he shifted his weight and disturbed a single leaf 40 meters below his hide. Now he was a dead man who simply had not stopped breathing yet. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you know someone whose skills were doubted until the moment they proved everyone wrong. 4 hours earlier, she had stood in the operations center at FOB Talon while Master Chief Petty Officer Brock Harwell looked at her like she was something unpleasant he had stepped in. "You want to do what?" the SEAL team leader had asked, not bothering to hide his amusement. "Hunt snipers. At night. In that valley. 10 confirmed enemy snipers operating in the Valley of Knives," she had replied, keeping her voice level. 23 coalition kills in 6 months. Someone needs to deal with it. Someone, Harwell repeated. He leaned back in his chair and exchanged glances with his men. "And you think that someone is an Army staff sergeant who has never operated with this task force? I think that someone needs to be a person who knows how to hunt in darkness," she said. "Your team has lost 3 men trying to locate these positions in daylight. Daylight is not when they are vulnerable." Harwell's smile had vanished. "Those are my men, Staff Sergeant. Good men. And you're suggesting we simply failed to do our jobs properly. I am suggesting that hunting snipers at night requires a specific skill set. One I have." The laughter from the SEALs had filled the room. Harwell let it continue for a long moment before raising his hand. "Nobody hunts snipers at night," he said. "Not SEALs. Not Delta. Nobody. You go into that valley after dark. You are not hunting. You are volunteering to be prey." Sergeant First Class Monroe Webb had stepped forward then, the Army liaison officer who had fought for 3 weeks to get her attached to this task force. "Sir, Staff Sergeant Mbu has qualifications that are relevant to this specific problem. Her background includes extensive training in nocturnal tracking techniques that predate her military service." Harwell's eyes had narrowed. "Predate her service? What does that mean exactly?" "It means I learned to hunt poachers in the African bush before I learned to shoot for the United States Army," Yolanda had said. "It means I spent 6 years tracking men who killed under cover of darkness in terrain that makes this valley look like a city park. It means I am volunteering to do what your team will not." The silence that followed had been absolute. Harwell's face had reddened, and for a moment she thought he might actually strike her. Instead, he had smiled again, but this time there was something ugly beneath it. "Fine," he had said. "You want to go die in that jungle? Staff Sergeant, be my guest. But you go alone. I am not risking any more of my men on a suicide mission proposed by someone who thinks growing up in Africa makes her qualified for special operations." She had accepted those terms without hesitation. Now, for hours into the darkness, she had already proven him wrong once. The first target had been positioned on the southern ridge, exactly where the thermal signatures had suggested. A clean shot at 600 meters. He never knew she was there. This second one was more careful, more experienced. He had chosen a position that offered multiple sight lines and excellent concealment. But concealment only worked if you remained perfectly still, and humans were not designed for perfect stillness. Eventually, everyone moved. Everyone made noise. Everyone betrayed themselves to someone who knew how to listen. Her father had taught her that lesson in the tall grass of South Luangwa, whispering in the darkness while poachers moved through the night around them. "The men who kill in darkness believe they own the night," he had told her. "They believe nothing can touch them. That belief is their weakness. Because the night belongs to no one, Yolanda. It simply waits to see who understands it better." She understood it better. The target shifted again, reaching for his water. A small movement. Human. Fatal. Yolanda exhaled slowly, felt her heartbeat steady between breaths, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle coughed once, suppressed, and 600 meters away, the second sniper slumped forward and did not move again. 2 down. 8 remaining. She began to move, sliding backward into the undergrowth with a silence that seemed impossible for a human being. The jungle swallowed her like she had never existed. Somewhere out there, the man they called the Owl was listening, wondering, beginning to suspect that something had changed in his valley. He had no idea what was coming for him. The third target had positioned himself near a stream, using the sound of running water to mask any noise he might make. It was a smart choice, the kind of choice that showed training and experience. But water worked both ways. It masked sound, yes, but it also created predictable patterns. Animals avoided certain crossings when predators were near. The jungle's rhythm changed around human presence if you knew how to read it. Yolanda had been reading jungles since before she could write her own name. She moved parallel to the stream, staying high on the ridge where the undergrowth grew thick and tangled. Each step was deliberate, weight transferring slowly, her body remembering lessons learned in a different jungle on a different continent. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, patient and calm. The earth speaks to those who listen, Yolanda. Every broken twig tells a story. Every disturbed leaf is a sentence. Learn to read, and the jungle will show you everything. She had learned to read, and right now, the jungle was telling her exactly where the third sniper was hiding. Before she had left the operations center, Petty Officer Second Class Danny Vance had caught her outside. He was young for a SEAL, maybe 24, with the kind of face that still showed uncertainty despite the trident on his chest. He had glanced around to make sure no one was watching before speaking. "Staff Sergeant," he had said quietly. "I pulled the thermal imaging from last week. The positions Harwell showed you in the briefing are outdated. Here are the current signatures we have mapped." He had pressed a folded paper into her hand. "Why?" she had asked. "Because the Master Chief is wrong," Vance had replied. "And because I have read your file. What you did in Kandahar 3 years ago. The night operation where you tracked that IED cell for 9 hours through terrain everyone said was impossible. You found all 6 of them before sunrise." He paused. "Nobody talks about that mission because it makes certain people look bad. But I know what you are capable of." She had looked at the young SEAL for a long moment. "That mission was classified. I know people who know things," he had said with a slight smile. "Good hunting, Staff Sergeant. I hope you make it back so I can watch Harwell choke on his own words." The memory faded as she spotted movement near the stream. The third target was repositioning, probably changing his sight line to cover a different approach to the valley. He moved well, she had to admit. Quiet, controlled. But he was focused on the trails below, on the routes that conventional forces would use. He never thought to look up. That was the problem with hunters who had never been hunted. They forgot that the food chain could always be rearranged. She settled into position, letting her breathing slow, letting the jungle sounds fill her awareness until she could distinguish every layer. Insects, water, wind through leaves, and beneath it all, the subtle wrongness of a human being trying to be invisible. The shot was clean. 550 meters. The target dropped without a sound, and the stream kept flowing as if nothing had happened. 3 down. She waited a full 10 minutes before moving, letting the jungle resettle, letting any listeners convince themselves that the sound had been something natural. A branch falling, a distant rumble, anything but what it actually was. When she finally began to move again, she angled east toward a ridge that the updated thermal data had flagged as a probable observation post. The Owl's network was spread throughout this valley like a spider web, each sniper positioned to cover approaches and provide overlapping fields of fire. Taking them one by one required patience and precision. One mistake, one rushed shot, and the entire network would collapse inward to hunt her. She was halfway to the ridge when she found the body. It was tucked into a natural depression beneath a fallen tree, so well concealed that she almost missed it entirely. An American. The uniform was weathered but recognizable, and the gear suggested special operations. One of Harwell's men, she realized. One of the 3 who had died, trying to locate these snipers in daylight. But something was wrong. She examined the body without touching it, reading the scene the way her father had taught her to read a poacher's kill site. The entry wound was in the back, which made sense for a sniper engagement. But the position of the body was wrong. It had been moved after death, arranged, placed here deliberately. And then she saw it. a thin wire running from beneath the body into the undergrowth. A trap. The body itself was bait, positioned to draw in anyone who came looking for their fallen comrade. The owl was not just defending this valley. He was hunting anyone who entered it. She backed away slowly, her mind racing. This changed everything. The enemy snipers were not simply holding positions and engaging targets of opportunity. They were part of a coordinated system designed to draw hunters into kill zones. The three SEALs had not simply been outmatched. They had been herded, trapped, executed. And if the owl had set traps for those who might come looking for bodies, then he had certainly prepared for someone who might come hunting his snipers, which meant he might already know she was here. She froze, every sense straining against the darkness. The jungle sounds continued unchanged. Insects singing, water flowing, wind moving through the canopy. But beneath it, almost imperceptible, she caught something else. A rhythm that did not belong. A pattern too regular to be natural. Someone was moving through the jungle behind her, tracking her. The hunted had just become the hunted. Yolanda did not run. Running made noise. Running created panic. Running got you killed. Instead, she became part of the jungle. She lowered herself into a dense thicket of ferns, controlling her breathing until it was nearly silent, letting the shadows wrap around her like a burial shroud. The footsteps behind her continued for another 30 seconds, then stopped. Whoever was tracking her had lost the trail. She waited. Minutes passed. The tracker moved again, circling wide, trying to pick up her sign. He was good, professional, but he was searching for someone who moved like a soldier, and Yolanda had stopped moving like a soldier the moment she entered this valley. She moved like her father had taught her to move, like a ghost, like a memory of something that was never really there. The tracker passed within 15 meters of her position. She could hear his breathing now, slightly elevated from the effort of the search. He paused, and she knew he was scanning the undergrowth, looking for any sign of disturbance. She had left none. The fern she had pushed through had already sprung back into place. The ground beneath her showed no impression. After a long moment, the tracker moved on, heading west toward the stream. Yolanda allowed herself a small breath of relief. One down. But if the owl had scouts patrolling the jungle, there would be others. She keyed her radio, keeping her voice barely above a whisper. Talon Base, this is Shadow 1. Requesting updated thermal sweep of Grid 7. I have confirmed enemy patrols in the area. Static answered her. Then Harwell's voice, distant and unconcerned. Shadow 1, we are experiencing technical difficulties with the imaging systems. Unable to comply at this time. Suggest you proceed with available intelligence. She felt a flash of anger, but suppressed it. Harwell was not going to help her. He was probably hoping she would die out here, another cautionary tale about Army personnel who thought they could operate at SEAL levels. Acknowledge Talon Base, she replied. Shadow 1 proceeding. She waited another 5 minutes before moving, letting the jungle settle, letting any listeners convince themselves the area was clear. Then she began to work her way north, toward the ridge where the fourth target should be positioned. 2 kilometers away, in a cave behind a waterfall, a man known only as the Owl studied a map spread across a flat stone. 3 of his snipers had gone silent in the past 4 hours. No radio contact, no check-ins, simply silence. He had operated in this valley for 8 months. He had killed 23 coalition personnel, including 3 of the Americans' vaunted SEALs. He had turned this jungle into a killing ground that no one could penetrate. And now something was wrong. He touched the positions on the map where his men should be. Southern Ridge, Stream Overwatch, Eastern Approach. All silent, all within a pattern that suggested not random misfortune, but systematic elimination. Someone was hunting his hunters. The Owl smiled slightly. It had been a long time since he had faced a worthy opponent. He activated his radio and issued a series of coded instructions. His remaining snipers would shift positions, collapse the perimeter, create overlapping kill zones. Whoever was out there would find themselves walking into a trap they could not escape. He had not survived this long by underestimating his enemies. But he had also never lost a hunt. That was not going to change tonight. Back in the jungle, Yolanda found the fourth target exactly where the thermal data had predicted. He was positioned on a rocky outcrop that offered excellent sight lines down into the valley. A good position, a professional choice. But the outcrop had one weakness, a blind spot to the northeast where the rock curved inward. A shooter approaching from that angle would be invisible until they were within 300 meters. She took her time. Patience was not just a virtue in this work. It was survival. She moved in centimeters, not meters, letting the minutes stack up until she was in position. The shot was almost easy. 400 meters. No wind. The target never knew she was there. 4 down. 6 remaining. She was moving to a new position when she found them. 2 more bodies, American, hidden in a ravine like discarded equipment. These were the other SEALs. The ones who had died trying to find the sniper network. But like the first body, something was wrong. They had not simply been shot. They had been positioned, arranged to create a crossfire zone that would catch anyone who came to retrieve them. The owl had used their bodies as bait, as tools, as part of his hunting system. She studied the kill zone, reading it like a blueprint. The angles, the sight lines, the positions where the owl snipers would have been waiting. It was elegant in its cruelty. The SEALs had come looking for their fallen comrades and walked directly into a trap. Now she understood why Harwell had lost 3 men. They had not been outfought. They had been outthought. The owl did not just shoot his enemies. He understood them, predicted them, used their own instincts against them. She would have to be smarter, less predictable, more patient. The night stretched ahead of her, full of danger and possibility. 6 more targets, hours until dawn, and somewhere out there, the owl was waiting. She melted back into the darkness and continued the hunt. The 5th target almost saw her. She had been working her way along a narrow game trail when he shifted position unexpectedly, swinging his rifle toward her section of jungle. Yolanda froze mid-step, 1 foot raised, her body suspended in an impossible balance that would have made her muscles scream if she had allowed herself to feel them. For 11 seconds, the sniper's scope passed over the exact patch of shadow where she stood motionless. 11 seconds where a single tremor, a single breath too deep, would have meant her death. Then he turned away, satisfied that the movement he had sensed was nothing but jungle shadows. She exhaled slowly and completed her step. 30 minutes later, he was dead. A clean shot from 300 meters while he was focused on the valley floor. 5 down. 5 remaining. She found a concealed position beneath a fallen log and allowed herself a moment of stillness. Not rest. Rest was a luxury she could not afford. But stillness. A chance to let her mind work through what she had learned. The owl's network was not random. Each sniper position connected to the others in a deliberate pattern, creating overlapping fields of observation that covered every approach to the valley. But there was something else, a geometry she was beginning to recognize. Each position she had cleared pointed inward toward a central location, like spokes on a wheel. The owl was not just commanding this network. He was at its center, protected by layers of snipers who would see any threat coming long before it reached him. She pulled out the thermal data Vance had given her and studied it in the dim light of the stars. There, a heat signature that had been flagged as a possible cooking fire near a waterfall on the northern edge of the valley. She had dismissed it initially as too obvious, but now she understood. It was obvious because the owl wanted it to be seen. He wanted hunters to approach the waterfall from predictable angles where his network could intercept them. Her radio crackled softly. "Shadow 1, this is Overwatch." The voice was Vance, barely audible, clearly transmitting without authorization. "Go ahead, Overwatch," she whispered. "Be advised, Master Chief has canceled extraction planning. You are officially listed as operating independently until 0600. No support assets will be deployed." He paused. "But I have additional thermal data. 3 more signatures that were not in the original briefing. Transmitting coordinates now." The data appeared on her display. 3 positions she had not known about. 3 more snipers between her and the owl. "That makes 8 remaining, not 5, she said quietly. "I know," Vance replied. The Master Chief had this data before your mission brief. He chose not to share it. Another pause. Watch yourself out there, Staff Sergeant. Someone wants you to fail. The transmission ended. Yolanda stared at the new coordinates, feeling a cold anger settle into her chest. Harwell had sent her into this valley without complete intelligence. He had wanted her to walk into positions she did not know existed. She pushed the anger down. It would not help her now. Later, if she survived, there would be time for anger. She thought of Sergeant First Class Webb, the man who had fought so hard to get her attached to this task force. Before her deployment, he had pulled her aside, his weathered face serious in the dim light of the briefing room. "Your father and I served together," he had told her. "Joint training exercise in Kenya, 1994. We spent 3 weeks in the bush learning from each other. He was the finest tracker I have ever known. When I heard about his death, I made a promise to myself that if I ever had the chance to help his daughter, I would." She had not known what to say. She had not known anyone from her father's military days still remembered him. Webb had put a hand on her shoulder. "He would be proud of you, Yolanda. What you have become, what you can do. You carry his gift. Do not let anyone tell you that you do not belong here." Now, alone in the darkness of a jungle that wanted her dead, she allowed herself to speak to him. To her father, the man who had taught her everything she knew about the night. "I found their pattern. Papa," she whispered. "I understand how they hunt, and I'm going to show them what it feels like to be prey." The jungle did not answer, but somewhere in the rustle of leaves and the distant call of night birds, she felt something that might have been approval. She studied the map again, overlaying the new positions with the ones she had already cleared. The geometry was clearer now. The owl had positioned himself near the waterfall, protected by 8 snipers arranged in a layered defense. To reach him, she would have to clear every single one. And the waterfall position itself was a natural fortress. Caves behind the falling water, multiple exit routes, excellent fields of fire in every direction. 5 targets down, 8 remaining. And at the center of it all, waiting in his fortress of stone and water, was the man who believed he owned this valley. She checked her ammunition, adjusted her scope, and began to move toward the waterfall, toward the heart of the spider's web. Dawn was still hours away. She intended to use every one of them. The 6th target had chosen a position beneath a massive tree with roots that spread outward like fingers gripping the earth. He had tucked himself into a natural hollow where the roots created a sheltered hide, invisible from above, protected from the sides, with clear sight lines down a narrow ravine. Yolanda stopped breathing when she saw it. She knew this position. Not this exact tree, not this exact jungle, but this position. The shape of it, the logic of it, the way the roots created a perfect ambush point for anyone moving through the ravine below. Her father had died in a position exactly like this one. The memory came rushing back with a force that nearly drove her to her knees. 15 years collapsed into nothing, and she was 14 years old again, standing in her aunt's house in Montana, listening to the phone call that destroyed her world. Her father had gone out alone that night. She was supposed to go with him. They had tracked a poaching ring for 3 weeks, following the men who were slaughtering elephants for ivory and leaving the carcasses to rot in the African sun. The final confrontation was supposed to happen together. Father and daughter, the way they had always worked. But she had been sick, a fever that had kept her bedridden for 2 days. Her father had told her to rest, promised they would finish the hunt when she was better. And then he had gone out alone because the poachers were moving and the window was closing. They found his body the next morning. He had been ambushed in a position just like this one, tree roots spreading outward, a natural hollow that offered concealment. The poachers had known he was coming and had prepared a killing ground. He had died alone in the darkness because she had not been there to watch his back. For 15 years, that guilt had lived inside her like a second heartbeat. Every night hunt she had ever conducted, every enemy she had tracked through darkness, had been an attempt to prove that her father's teachings had not died with him, that his legacy lived on in her. And now she was staring at a position that could have been his grave. The target shifted in his hide, adjusting his rifle, completely unaware that death was watching him from the shadows. He was young, she realized. Maybe 25. Probably trained by the owl himself. Probably thought he was invincible in this jungle that had swallowed so many coalition soldiers. He had no idea what was coming. Yolanda felt something shift inside her. The cold professionalism that had carried her through 5 kills began to crack, and beneath it was something older. Something that had been waiting 15 years for release. Fury, not the hot anger of the moment, but the deep, patient fury of loss that never fully healed. Her father had been a good man, a protector, someone who had dedicated his life to preserving the wild places and the creatures that lived in them. And he had been murdered by men who cared about nothing but profit, just like the men in this valley. Men who killed from the shadows. Men who believed the darkness made them untouchable. She raised her rifle and sighted on the target. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. But behind her eyes, tears were forming for the first time in years. "I am sorry, Papa," she whispered. "I am sorry I was not there." She squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed through the jungle, louder than it should have been, as if the sound itself was carrying her grief out into the world. The target slumped forward and did not move. 6 down. Yolanda lowered her rifle and let the tears fall. Just for a moment. Just long enough to acknowledge the wound that had never closed. Her father's face swam in her memory, his gentle hands teaching her to track, his patient voice explaining how to read the jungle's secrets, his pride when she made her first successful stalk at age 10. He had given her everything she needed to survive in the darkness, and then he had left her alone to use those gifts without him. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and felt the grief harden into something else. Resolve. Purpose. The owl had built his network in this valley because he believed no one could challenge him here. He believed the night was his domain. He was wrong. She began to move again, but she had taken only 3 steps when she realized something had changed. The jungle had gone quiet. Not the natural quiet of night creatures resting, but the unnatural quiet of prey sensing a predator. And then, from somewhere in the darkness ahead, a light flashed. Once, twice, 3 times. A signal. Someone had seen her muzzle flash. Someone knew exactly where she was. The owl had found her. She dropped into cover as the first bullet snapped through the air where her head had been a heartbeat before. The hunt had just changed. She was no longer the only predator in this jungle. Now she was also prey. The bullet had missed her by inches. Yolanda pressed herself into the earth, her mind racing through possibilities. The shot had come from the northeast, which meant at least one of the remaining snipers had repositioned to hunt her specifically. She waited for a follow-up shot. None came. The shooter was patient, disciplined, waiting for her to move. Fine. She could be patient too. For 20 minutes, she lay motionless in the undergrowth, controlling her breathing, letting the jungle sounds return to normal around her. The shooter would be watching for movement, listening for any sound that betrayed her position. She gave him nothing. When she finally moved, it was backward, not forward. Centimeter by centimeter, she withdrew from her position, using the natural contours of the terrain to mask her retreat. It took almost an hour to cover 50 meters, but when she finally reached a protected depression behind a boulder, she had broken contact completely. She keyed her radio. Talon Base, this is Shadow 1. I'm taking fire. Request immediate support. Static. Dead air. Nothing. Talon Base, respond. The radio was silent. Not the static of poor reception, but the absolute silence of a dead connection. She checked her equipment. Battery full. Antenna intact. The radio should be working. Someone had cut her communications. Harwell. It had to be Harwell. He had access to the frequencies. He could have blocked her channel, isolated her from any support, left her alone in this jungle to die. The anger flared again, but she pushed it down. Anger was a luxury. Right now, she needed to think. She studied the terrain ahead, replaying everything that had happened since she entered the valley. The positions she had cleared, the paths she had taken, the pattern of the network she had been dismantling. And then she saw it. The owl had not been defending his network. He had been using it. Each target she had eliminated had pushed her in a specific direction. Northeast, toward the waterfall, toward him. She had thought she was hunting, but she had been herded, guided, manipulated like an animal being driven toward a trap. The snipers she had killed were not his best men. They were sacrifices, bait, positioned to be found, positioned to be eliminated, positioned to make her feel confident while she walked deeper and deeper into his kill zone. And now she was exactly where he wanted her. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Everything she thought she understood about this operation was wrong. The owl was not reacting to her. He was controlling her. Every move she had made had been anticipated, planned for, incorporated into his design. The 7th and 8th targets were out there right now, waiting, not to defend themselves, but to draw her into a final trap. A crossfire zone she would not escape. She closed her eyes and forced herself to think like him. If she were the owl, where would she position the trap? What approach would she expect her prey to take? What angles would guarantee a kill? The answer came to her slowly. The game trail. The obvious path that led toward the waterfall. It was the route any tactical mind would choose. Good cover, minimal exposure, a clear approach to the objective. It was also a perfect kill zone. High ground on both sides. No escape, fields of fire that would catch anyone moving through from multiple angles. He expected her to use the trail. He expected her to be predictable. So she would be unpredictable. Instead of moving toward the waterfall, she circled west, climbing the ridge that overlooked the trail from above. It took 2 hours of painstaking movement, but when she finally reached the ridgeline, she could see the entire trap laid out below her. 2 snipers, targets 7 and 8, positioned on opposite sides of the trail in elevated heights that would create devastating crossfire. They were not watching for threats from above. They were watching the trail, waiting for her to walk into their sights. The owl had made one mistake. He had assumed she would think like a soldier. She did not think like a soldier. She thought like a hunter. The first shot took target 7 in the side of the head. Before his body had finished falling, she had shifted her aim and fired again. Target 8 jerked once and went still. 7 and 8 down. 2 remaining. The owl and 1 more. She allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The trap had been reversed. The herder had become the prey. But her calms were still dead. Dawn was still hours away. And somewhere near that waterfall, the owl was waiting in his fortress, knowing now that something had gone very wrong with his perfect plan. She was in his kill zone with no support and no way out except through him. The final hunt was about to begin. Yolanda removed the thermal scope from her rifle and placed it carefully in her pack. Any sniper watching her would have thought she had lost her mind. Thermal imaging was the greatest advantage a night hunter could possess. It turned darkness into daylight, revealed body heat through vegetation, made the invisible visible. But her father had taught her the truth about thermals long before she ever wore a uniform. They had been tracking poachers through the Luanghua Valley, moving through grass so tall it swallowed them completely. She had been 12 years old, proud of the thermal monocular her father had acquired from a wildlife conservation group. She had scanned the darkness ahead, confident in her technological advantage. Her father had gently pushed the device down. The machine sees heat, he had said, but the men we hunt know this. They wrap themselves in thermal blankets. They use the river to cool their bodies. They watch for the glow of infrared emitters. The machine makes you feel powerful, Yolanda, but it also makes you predictable. And predictable hunters become prey. She had not understood then. She understood now. The owl would be watching for thermal signatures. His last sniper would be equipped to detect the infrared emissions that thermal scopes produced. By using the technology that should have given her an advantage, she would be painting a target on herself. So she would hunt the old way. The way her father had taught her before she ever touched a piece of military equipment. She closed her eyes and let her other senses expand. The jungle spoke to her in layers. Wind through leaves, a constant whisper that changed pitch and rhythm depending on what it moved through. Water falling in the distance. The waterfall that marked the owl's fortress. insects calling to each other in patterns that shifted when predators moved through their territory. And beneath it all, the subtle wrongness of human presence. She opened her eyes and began to move, not toward where she thought the ninth target might be, but toward where the jungle told her something was waiting. A patch of silence in the insect chorus. A gap in the natural rhythm that suggested something large and still was occupying space that should have been empty. Her father's voice guided her. Trust what the earth tells you. Animals do not lie. When the birds go silent, something has frightened them. When the insects stop singing, something is close. The jungle is always honest. You simply have to learn its language. She had learned its language. She had spoken it fluently since childhood. The ninth target was positioned in a tree, elevated above the jungle floor in a platform that would have been invisible to ground-based observation. A clever position. Professional. But he had made one mistake. He had urinated from his platform sometime in the last hour, and the smell hung in the still air like a signpost. She circled wide, approaching from downwind, letting the jungle's sounds mask her movement. The climb to a parallel tree took 15 minutes of careful, silent effort. When she finally reached a stable shooting position, she was level with the target, separated by 40 meters of empty air. He never knew she was there. The shot took him through the temple, and he slumped against his harness without a sound. 9 down, 1 remaining. She descended from the tree and paused at its base, allowing herself a moment to simply exist in the darkness. The jungle wrapped around her like an embrace, familiar and welcoming despite its dangers. For the first time since entering this valley, she felt something other than tension. She felt like she was home. This was what her father had given her. Not just skills, not just techniques, but a relationship with the wild places that most people would never understand. The darkness was not her enemy. It was her element, the place where she was most fully herself. She thought of Webb, the man who had fought so hard to give her this chance. He had spent political capital he could not afford, argued with superior officers who did not want to listen, staked his reputation on an army staff sergeant that the SEALs had dismissed as a joke. He had done it because of a promise made to a dead man 30 years ago, because he believed in her father's legacy, because he saw in her something worth fighting for. She would not let him down. She would not let either of them down. The waterfall was close now. She could hear it clearly, a constant roar that would mask sound in both directions. The owl had chosen his position well. The water would cover any noise she made approaching, but it would also cover any noise he made preparing to kill her. She checked her rifle, confirmed her ammunition, steadied her breathing. 1 target remaining. The man who had built this valley into a killing ground. The man who had murdered 23 coalition soldiers and 3 of Harwell's SEALs. The man who believed he was the apex predator of the darkness. He was waiting for her in his fortress of stone and water, and she was coming for him. The waterfall roared ahead of her, a wall of white noise that swallowed every other sound in the jungle. Yolanda crouched at the edge of the tree line, studying the terrain that separated her from the owl's fortress. She had known he would be here. She had known it since the mission briefing, when Harwell had dismissed the waterfall as an unlikely position and focused instead on the valley floor. But Yolanda had seen something in the reconnaissance photos that no one else had noticed. Every confirmed kill attributed to the owl had occurred within 500 meters of running water. The stream where he had ambushed the first SEAL team. The river crossing where a patrol had been decimated. The drainage canal where 2 coalition soldiers had died without ever seeing their attacker. Water. Always water. The owl used sound cover the way other snipers use concealment. He understood that in a jungle this dense, ears were often more important than eyes. The waterfall was his masterpiece, a position that offered complete acoustic dominance. He could move, reload, even speak aloud, and the crashing water would erase every trace. Anyone approaching would be deaf to his preparations. But the water worked both ways. He could not hear her either. She began her approach, moving through the undergrowth with the patience her father had drilled into her since childhood. The ground here was rocky, treacherous in the darkness, but she had been navigating terrain like this her entire life. Each step was placed with deliberate precision, weight transferring slowly, body low and balanced. The mist from the waterfall began to coat her skin as she drew closer. The air was cooler here, thick with moisture that clung to everything. Good for concealment, bad for maintaining a clear scope. She wiped her rifle's optic with a soft cloth and continued forward. The cave mouth came into view gradually, a dark opening behind the curtain of falling water. From this angle, she could see the edge of a platform that had been constructed just inside the entrance. Equipment bags, a sleeping mat, the barrel of a rifle resting on a bipod, pointed outward toward the jungle. He was in there, waiting. She circled left, looking for a better angle, and that was when she almost died. The tripwire was nearly invisible, a thin filament stretched across the game trail at ankle height. She saw it only because a drop of water from an overhanging leaf caught the faint starlight and reflected off the wire surface. She froze, one foot suspended 6 inches from the trigger. For a long moment, she did not move, did not breathe. The wire was connected to something in the undergrowth to her right. A mine probably, or a flare that would illuminate the entire area and give the owl a perfect target. Carefully, infinitely slowly, she lowered her foot and stepped backward. Her heart was pounding now, adrenaline flooding her system. That had been close, closer than anything else tonight. The owl had prepared his approaches with the same meticulous attention he had applied to his sniper network. She allowed herself a moment of dark humor. Harwell would be disappointed, she thought. He was probably already composing the report about how the Army Staff Sergeant had gotten herself killed trying to play with the big boys. Sorry to ruin your paperwork, Master Chief. The thought steadied her. She was not going to die in this jungle. She was not going to give Harwell the satisfaction. And she was not going to let the owl add another name to his list of victims. She found another approach, circling wider, climbing the rocks beside the waterfall where the spray made every surface slick and treacherous. It took 45 minutes to cover 200 meters, but when she finally reached a stable position, she had a clear line of sight into the cave. The owl was there. She could see him now, a figure silhouetted against the dim light of a small lamp inside the cave. He was sitting motionless, rifle across his knees, watching the jungle approaches with the patience of a man who had spent his entire life waiting for prey to come to him. He was older than she had expected, 50 perhaps, gray at the temples, but his posture spoke of a lifetime of discipline, and the way his hands rested on his weapon suggested a familiarity that went beyond mere training. This was a man who had killed more people than she could count, a man who had turned this valley into a graveyard for coalition forces. A man who believed with absolute certainty that he was the most dangerous thing in this jungle. He was about to discover how wrong he was. She settled into position, letting her breathing slow, letting her heartbeat steady. The shot would be difficult. 200 meters through mist and spray at a target partially concealed by the cave's irregular entrance. But she had made harder shots, and she had never wanted to make a shot more than she wanted this one. The owl shifted slightly, turning his head as if sensing something in the darkness. His eyes swept across the rocks where she was hiding, and for one terrible moment, she thought he had seen her. He had not, but he knew something was wrong. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the way his hands tightened on his rifle. He knew she was close. The final duel was about to begin. The owl moved first. He rolled from his seated position with a speed that seemed impossible for a man his age, bringing his rifle up as he disappeared deeper into the cave. In a fraction of a second it took Yolanda to adjust her aim. He was gone, swallowed by the darkness beyond the lamplight. He had sensed her. Somehow, despite the roar of the waterfall, despite her perfect concealment, he had known. She did not panic. Panic was death. Instead, she shifted position, sliding sideways along the rocks to a new vantage point. The cave had multiple exits. She had seen them in the reconnaissance photos. If the owl was running, he would emerge somewhere along the cliff face, and she needed to be ready. But the owl was not running. The shot came from inside the cave, punching through the mist and spray to strike the rock 3 inches from her head. Stone fragments peppered her face, and she dropped flat, pressing herself into the smallest possible target. He had night vision. He had to. There was no other way he could have placed that shot so accurately in the darkness. She was outmatched technologically. He had equipment she had abandoned. He had home field advantage. He had decades of experience killing people exactly like her. But she had something he did not. She had her father's teachings, and she had spent her entire life preparing for a moment exactly like this one. She closed her eyes and listened. The waterfall was a constant roar, but beneath it, she could detect variations in the sound. The way it echoed differently when something moved through the cave. The subtle shift in acoustic patterns when a body displaced air. There, a change in the water's song. Movement toward the eastern exit. She did not look. Looking would require her to expose herself. Instead, she trusted her ears, trusted the jungle, trusted everything her father had taught her about hunting in absolute darkness. She rose, pivoted, and fired in a single fluid motion. The shot disappeared into the darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she heard it. A grunt of pain, a body stumbling, the clatter of a rifle falling against stone. She had hit him. She moved immediately, abandoning her position and circling toward the eastern exit. He was wounded, but wounded predators were the most dangerous. She could not give him time to recover, time to set another trap, time to turn this engagement back in his favor. The cave exit was a narrow crack in the cliff face, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. She approached from the side, rifle raised, every sense straining for any indication of where he was. She found him 10 meters from the exit, propped against a boulder with his hand pressed against his side. Blood was seeping between his fingers, black in the darkness. His rifle lay on the ground beside him, just out of reach. He looked up as she approached, and in the faint starlight, she saw his face clearly for the first time. Weathered, scarred, eyes that held no fear, only a kind of professional respect. "You hunt well," he said in accented English. His voice was strained but steady. "Better than anyone I have faced." "Who trained you?" "My father," she replied, keeping her rifle aimed at his chest. The owl nodded slowly. "He must have been a great hunter." He was. For a long moment, they regarded each other across the darkness. Two predators at the end of a long hunt. One dying, one victorious. "I have killed many soldiers in this valley," the owl said. "Americans, Australians, others. They all came with their technology, their night vision, their thermal imaging. And they all died because they trusted machines more than instinct." He coughed, and blood flecked his lips. "You are different. You understand what they never could. The darkness is not an enemy to be conquered. It is a teacher to be respected." Yolanda said nothing. There was nothing to say. The owl's hand moved slightly toward his rifle. She saw the intention before he could complete it and fired once. The shot echoed off the rocks, and the owl slumped backward, finally still. 10 down. The valley's nightmare was over. She stood over his body for a long moment, feeling the adrenaline begin to fade, feeling the exhaustion that had been waiting beneath the surface start to creep into her limbs. It was done. She had accomplished what the SEALs had said was impossible. She had hunted the hunters in their own darkness and won. Her radio crackled. She froze. The radio had been dead for hours. Cut off. Silent. But now it was crackling with static, and beneath the static she could hear voices. Harwell's voice. "I do not care what Vance reported. The mission parameters were clear. No extraction until 0600. If she is still alive, she can walk out on her own." Another voice responded. "Master Chief, we have confirmed kills on the network. 10 targets eliminated. She completed the mission. Then she will be fine waiting for scheduled extraction," Harwell replied. "I am not risking birds for an army asset who should not have been here in the first place." The transmission ended, and the radio went silent again. Yolanda stared at the device in her hand. The comms had not failed. Harwell had blocked her channel deliberately. And now, with the mission complete and dawn approaching, he was refusing to send extraction. She was miles from the FOB, exhausted, low on ammunition in hostile territory, and she was completely on her own. Dawn was breaking over the valley when Yolanda finally reached Extraction Point Delta. The journey had taken 4 hours. 4 hours of navigating hostile terrain on legs that screamed for rest. 4 hours of maintaining tactical awareness despite exhaustion that pulled at her like gravity. 4 hours of moving through a jungle that had tried to kill her all night, knowing that the man who should have been coordinating her rescue was actively hoping she would fail. She had made it anyway. The extraction point was a small clearing on the eastern edge of the valley, just large enough for a helicopter to land. She emerged from the tree line with her rifle raised, scanning for threats, unable to fully believe that the night was finally over. The clearing was empty. No helicopter, no support team, nothing but grass and morning mist. She checked her watch. 05:45. 15 minutes before the scheduled extraction that Harwell had no intention of honoring. She could wait, but waiting meant trusting that someone would eventually come for her. After everything that had happened tonight, trust was in short supply. She was calculating the distance to FOB Talon, wondering if she had enough left in her to walk the 12 kilometers when she heard it. The distant thump of rotor blades cutting through the morning air. A helicopter appeared over the ridge, banking hard toward the clearing. It was not the standard extraction bird. This was a smaller aircraft, moving fast and low, piloted by someone who clearly did not care about fuel efficiency or noise discipline. The helicopter touched down in a storm of grass and debris, and the side door slid open to reveal Chief Warrant Officer 3 Letitia Sandoval. The pilot was still in her seat, but she had turned to look at Yolanda with an expression that mixed professional assessment with something that might have been admiration. Staff Sergeant Mbu. Sandoval called over the rotor noise. I was told you might need a ride. Yolanda approached the helicopter, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. Who told you that? Petty Officer Vance. He has been monitoring the situation all night. When he heard Master Chief Harwell cancel your extraction, he contacted me directly. Sandoval's jaw tightened. I do not take orders from Harwell, and I do not leave people behind. Yolanda climbed into the helicopter and collapsed against the seat. The relief was overwhelming. For the first time in nearly 10 hours, she allowed herself to believe that she was going to survive this night. Sandoval lifted off immediately, banking toward FOB Talon. As the valley fell away beneath them, Yolanda looked down at the jungle that had tried so hard to kill her. Somewhere in that green darkness, 10 bodies lay cooling in the morning air. 10 snipers who would never kill another coalition soldier. 10 predators who had learned too late that the night did not belong to them. She had done what everyone said was impossible. She had hunted the hunters and won. Sandoval's voice crackled through her headset. Vance filled me in on what happened tonight. The comms blackout, the withheld intelligence, the canceled extraction. She paused. Harwell, try to get you killed, Staff Sergeant. You know that, right? I know. What are you going to do about it? Yolanda considered the question. Her body was exhausted, but her mind was clear. Harwell had sabotaged her mission from the beginning. He had sent her into that valley without complete intelligence. He had cut her communications when she needed support. He had refused to extract her even after she completed the mission. He had done everything in his power to ensure she would die in that jungle. And when she survived anyway, he had tried to abandon her. I'm going to walk into that operations center, she said slowly, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what he did. Good, Sandoval replied, because Vance has been documenting everything. Every order, every transmission, every decision Harwell made tonight. He sent it all to someone who outranks the Master Chief by a significant margin. Yolanda felt something shift in her chest. Vance, the young SEAL who had given her the updated thermal data, who had secretly radioed her with intelligence Harwell had withheld, who had watched her back all night despite the risk to his own career. He is going to face consequences for that, she said. Probably, Sandoval agreed. But he said it was worth it. He said some things matter more than career advancement. She glanced back at Yolanda. He also said you're the most impressive operator he has ever seen. And coming from a SEAL, even a young one, that means something. The FOB came into view ahead, a cluster of tents and hardened structures carved out of the jungle. Yolanda could see figures moving near the landing pad. Harwell would be there. Webb would be there. And whoever Vance had contacted would be there too. The reckoning was coming. She checked her rifle, straightened her uniform as much as her exhausted body would allow, and prepared to face the man who had tried to kill her. This was not over yet. The helicopter touched down at FOB Talon to a reception Yolanda had not expected. A crowd had gathered near the landing pad. SEALs, Army personnel, support staff. Word had spread through the base that someone had done the impossible. Someone had entered the Valley of Knives alone and eliminated the entire sniper network that had terrorized coalition forces for months. Master Chief Petty Officer Brock Harwell stood at the front of the crowd, his face arranged in an expression of professional satisfaction. As Yolanda stepped off the helicopter, he strode forward with his hand extended. "Staff Sergeant Mbu," he said loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. "Outstanding work. This joint operation has been a complete success. The coordination between SEAL intelligence assets and Army tactical capabilities has proven exactly what our combined forces can achieve." Yolanda stared at his outstretched hand, but did not take it. "Joint operation," she repeated. Harwell's smile flickered, but held. "Of course. The intelligence we provided, the operational planning, the support framework. This was a team effort from the beginning. The intelligence you provided was incomplete," Yolanda said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "The operational planning consisted of you telling me I would die, and the support framework included cutting my communications and refusing extraction after I completed the mission." Harwell's smile vanished. "Staff Sergeant, I do not know what you think happened out there, but I assure you that any communication difficulties were purely technical in nature." "Technical," she repeated. "Is that what you call deliberately blocking my radio channel?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Harwell's eyes darted to his SEAL teammates, looking for support, but none of them would meet his gaze. Before Harwell could respond, another helicopter appeared over the tree line. This one was larger, faster, and bore markings that made several people in the crowd straighten instinctively. It touched down beside Sandoval's bird, and when the door opened, a two-star general stepped out. Major General Catherine O'Yelleran walked across the landing pad with the measured stride of someone who had commanded troops in 3 wars. Her eyes swept the crowd, took in the scene, and settled on Harwell with an expression that made the Master Chief visibly pale. "Master Chief Harwell," the general said, "I have spent the last 6 hours reviewing a rather comprehensive file that was transmitted to my office. Communications logs, mission briefings, real-time status reports." She paused. "Would you like to explain why you sent an operator into hostile territory with deliberately incomplete intelligence?" Harwell's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Or perhaps you would like to explain why you blocked her communications during active contact with enemy forces," General O'Yelleran continued. "Or why you canceled extraction for an asset who had just single-handedly eliminated a threat that your team had failed to address for 6 months. "General," Harwell finally managed, "there were operational considerations that required flexibility in our support posture." "Operational considerations," the general repeated. She turned to look at Yolanda, and her expression softened slightly. "Staff Sergeant Mbu, I have read your file. I have reviewed the after-action intelligence, and I have spoken with Petty Officer Vance, who has shown more integrity tonight than some officers show in their entire careers." She turned back to Harwell. "You are relieved of duty, Master Chief. Effective immediately. You will report to the JAG office at 0800 for the beginning of what I expect will be a lengthy investigation into conduct unbecoming and dereliction of duty." Harwell's face went white. "General, my record speaks for itself. 15 years of distinguished service." "Your record speaks to your capabilities," the general replied. "Your actions tonight speak to your character. I find the latter more relevant at this moment." 2 military police officers appeared at Harwell's sides. He looked around wildly, searching for support, finding none. Even his own SEAL teammates had stepped back, distancing themselves from a man whose career was ending in disgrace. As they led him away, Sergeant First Class Webb pushed through the crowd. His weathered face was split by a rare smile as he approached Yolanda. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. So proud. She felt tears threatening again and forced them back. She would not cry in front of this crowd. Not now. General O'Yelleran approached her. "Staff Sergeant, the entire valley has been secured thanks to your actions. 23 coalition personnel who would have died in the coming months will go home to their families instead." She paused. "I have to ask, how did you do what no one else could?" Yolanda thought of her father, of the lessons learned in African darkness, of the gift he had given her that no military training could replicate. "Someone taught me that the night is not an enemy," she said. "It is a teacher. I simply paid attention to the lessons." The general nodded slowly. Then she did something that made the entire crowd fall silent. She saluted. Yolanda returned the salute, her exhausted body somehow finding the strength to stand straight. But even as the crowd began to applaud, she knew there was one more thing left unfinished. One conversation she still needed to have. The sun was setting over FOB Talon when Yolanda finally found a moment alone. She had spent the day in debriefings, recounting every detail of her mission to intelligence officers who hung on her every word. She had reviewed maps, identified positions, explained the patterns she had recognized in the Owl's network. By the time they released her, she was more exhausted than she had been after the mission itself. But there was one thing she needed to do before she could rest. She walked to the edge of the base, to the spot where the jungle met the clear perimeter. This was where she had entered the valley 12 hours ago, where she had stepped out of the light and into the darkness that had shaped her entire life. The jungle looked different now, less threatening. The shadows that had hidden 10 killers were just shadows again, and the sounds that had masked approaching death were just the ordinary music of the wild. She stood at the tree line and let herself breathe. "Papa," she said quietly, "I did it. I found them all. Even the owl. Even the one they said could not be caught." The jungle did not answer, but she had not expected it to. Her father had been gone for 15 years. His voice existed only in her memories now, in the lessons he had left behind, in the skills he had passed down through patient hours of teaching in the African darkness. But sometimes in moments like this, she could almost feel him beside her, a presence that had never fully departed, a love that death could not erase. "I used everything you taught me," she continued. "The listening, the patience, the trust. They had night vision and thermal imaging and all the technology in the world. But I had you, and that was enough." She stayed there until the last light faded from the sky, watching the stars appear one by one. The same stars her father had taught her to navigate by. The same darkness he had taught her to embrace. Footsteps approached behind her. She did not turn. She knew from the rhythm who it was. Sergeant First Class Webb stopped beside her, his own gaze fixed on the darkening jungle. "I have something for you," he said after a long moment. "Something I have been holding for a very long time." He reached into his pocket and produced a worn envelope, yellowed with age. The handwriting on the front was familiar. Her father's precise script, forming her name in letters she had not seen in 15 years. "He gave this to me in '94, Webb said, during our joint training. He told me that if anything ever happened to him, I should find his daughter and give this to her when she was ready." He paused. "I think you're ready now." Yolanda took the envelope with trembling hands. For a moment, she could not bring herself to open it. This was her father's voice reaching across 15 years of silence. His final words, waiting all this time to be heard. She opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. "My dearest Yolanda," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone and you have become the hunter I always knew you would be. Do not mourn me too long. Death comes for all of us, and I have made peace with that truth. I am writing this because I want you to know something that I may never have the chance to tell you in person. You are the greatest gift of my life, not because of what you can do, but because of who you are, your kindness, your courage, your determination to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I have taught you everything I know about the darkness. But the truth is, you surpassed me long ago. You have instincts I never possessed, a connection to the wild places that goes deeper than anything I could give you. You do not merely hunt in the darkness, Yolanda. You belong to it, and it belongs to you. Whatever path you choose, know that I'm proud of you. Not for your skills, not for your accomplishments, but for the person you have become. The person you will continue to become long after these words are read. Oh, well, my daughter. And remember that the night is not your enemy. It is your inheritance. With all my love, forever. Papa. The tears came then, and she did not try to stop them. She let them fall freely, carrying 15 years of grief and guilt and longing out into the darkness where they belonged. Webb put a hand on her shoulder, but said nothing. Some moments were beyond words. When she finally composed herself, she folded the letter carefully and placed it against her heart. General O'Yelleran has made you an offer, Webb said quietly. She wants you to establish a training program. Night operations, tracking, the skills your father taught you. She believes those techniques could save hundreds of lives. Yolanda looked at the jungle one last time, at the darkness that had shaped her, at the legacy her father had left behind. Yes, she said, I will do it. Webb nodded. Your father would be proud. She smiled through her tears. I know. The night wrapped around them like a blanket, full of sounds and shadows and secrets. And somewhere in that darkness, she could feel her father smiling too. If this story moved you, drop a comment and share your favorite moment. Or tell us about someone in your life whose quiet strength inspired you. We would love to hear your story.